Aaron Elster was born in the small, northeastern village of Sokołów Podlaski in Poland. Having had 3 birth certificates, his actual birth date remains unknown. Before the war, his family owned a butcher shop. Their meat was not kosher, and as a result, many of their customers were not Jewish. The contacts made in the shop helped them to survive the war. The war began on September 1st, 1939. Aaron remembered being in school and hearing the sound of bombs falling. On October 11th, 1939, when Aaron was likely around 6 years old, a series of anti-Semitic attacks began. 2 Sokołów Podlaski ghettos were created in 1941. A total of 5,080 Jews were confined to them. Among those confined, Aaron and his family. The ghetto was surrounded by brick walls and barbed wire. And one morning, Aaron was woken up by shouts and gunshots. Soldiers had surrounded the ghetto and were closing in. The Sokołów Podlaski ghetto was being liquidated. With screaming and gunshots around them, Aaron looked his family in their fearful eyes. A rifle was fired and hit a piece of wood. Aaron was bleeding from the mouth. A splinter was embedded into his upper lip. He remembered looking at his younger sister and seeing the sad look in her eyes as she could not comprehend what was happening around them. That sad glance remained with him for the rest of his life. His father leaned in and whispered, "Run." Aaron's father, Chaim Srul Elster, probably died at the Treblinka death camp, just like Aaron's younger sister. His mother survived the war by hiding at several places near Sokołów. Shortly before the end of the war, she was murdered by the Poles. He continued to sprint to his uncle's house and made his way into the sewer. He traversed much of the ghetto through the sewer, then climbed out. In the midst of so much shouting, gunshots, and fear, Aaron saw an old Polish woman with a traditional babushka on her head on the opposite side of the fence. "Come," she hollered, her hands waving rapidly. Aaron bolted to her. She held up the sharp strands of wire to allow him to crawl through. Aaron scraped his legs and began bleeding. Yet fear numbed it all.
Aaron made his way through surrounding farms and ended up at the Gorseys' home. His parents had made arrangements with the Gorseys to take care of one child, his sister. When he showed up, Mrs. Gorsky started screaming. However, he cried, and she took pity on him. He wasn't safe when he ended up at the Gorseys' home. The war wasn't over. After arriving, he was immediately secluded into a small, cramped attic, which he referred to as a safe haven. He stayed in that small attic, isolated for 2 entire years. In that tiny space, he was subject to extremes of heat and cold and dared not to make a sound. Only when rain and hail clattered on the roof above him could he produce some noise. He often told his friends that he would use the occasion to sing. He never bathed, never brushed his teeth or hair, and he was constantly thinking about dying. He was utterly alone. He spent close to 2 years in that attic. He was fearful of the family because they constantly threatened to turn him in. But the family was afraid that if they kicked him out and was caught, he might reveal their identity. The family was trapped in a dichotomy. He was liberated by the Russian army in 1945. After the war, Aaron's uncle Sam, who had fought for the Russian partisans during the war, arrived in Sokołów Podlaski to take care of Aaron and his sister. From 1945 to 1946, the 3 of them went through a series of displaced persons camps in Germany. In 1947, Aaron and his sister Irina left Germany for the United States, arriving in New York and eventually settling in Chicago. Aaron was one of the only 29 people that survived out of the original 5,000 Jewish people that lived in his town. Only 29 survived, and only 2 children survived, Aaron's sister and himself. In 1954, he joined the United States Army and fought in the Korean War. He married Jacqueline in 1954, and they had 2 sons. Since then, he served as the chairman of the Speakers Bureau and vice president at the Holocaust Museum in Illinois and Education Center. Speaking there has allowed him to pursue his goal of convince the people to stop hitting on each other. In an effort to share his story, he wrote a book called I Still See Your Haunting Eyes. Aaron Elster was of those responsible for helping to pass the Holocaust mandate in the state of Illinois, Illinois being the first state to do so. This law required all schools in Illinois to teach a unit of study on the Holocaust. He is one of a handful of Holocaust survivors whose hologram is to be found at the Illinois Holocaust Museum. Thus, his message will live on forever. Aaron passed away at the age of 85 in 2018. Thank you.